Hello, Grace and I are going to Trader Joe's. That's it. That's the vlog. See ya. Good morning. I get my second COVID shot today, so I will be fully vaccinated after 10 o'clock this morning. I am so excited. It's gonna be so nice to not have to worry about being hospitalized. So yeah, I will film it as... Hi. So I just finished work and I'm actually feeling okay after my vaccine, which is great because I don't like feeling gross. So yeah, not too bad.
Oh, das muss nicht so machen. Is this a vlog or is this a live photo?
Good morning. It's Thursday and today's my first official day of work. Okay, well, no, because I was for training, right? But like, today's my first official day where I get to work by myself. So I start work at 3, which I'm super excited about. I'll just be able to work at my own pace without having, you know, to like constantly check in with someone. But I'm also kind of nervous because what if I like mess up big time? But I think I can do it. I just gotta like take my time. Other than that, I basically have nothing. I have class, and then I'm probably just gonna take Nina for a walk and then like watch some TV. And then I'm hoping that work goes well and I have a much more fun weekend. I know I haven't really filmed that much this week. It's just not been like an interesting week. So I figure I might as well like save it for the weekend when like Brahita is coming and I can take some more like fun videos then, because like we'll do fun things, but like I have not been doing anything relatively fun. So yeah, that's my update for today. Hello, happy Friday. I just finished watching Falcon and Winter Soldier. Before that I was just working on a paper, hanging with Nina, you know, the usual. So I have so many thoughts on this week's episode that I don't get into it. Like okay, I'm just really excited to talk about this. Okay, so I want to start off by talking about Bucky. So this week's episode started off with like seeing Bucky in Wakanda and seeing him overcome his Winter Soldier settings. And I think what's so amazing about that like scene is that we finally see Bucky as healed and how much he owes Wakanda. And so it makes so much more sense when in the following scene we see him talking to the Dora Milaje. I think it's Milaje. Dora Milaje. Sorry, okay, Dora Milaje, and he's basically like Ada, like he's trying to explain himself because he really doesn't want them to think that what he did was in vain and what they did for him was in vain. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. And in this episode we see Bucky and Sam getting a little closer, which of course makes me really happy because I think that they would be a really formidable duo. Next, I want to talk about John Walker because goddamn, this was an episode for John Walker. So I'm actually extremely impressed with this actor, Wyatt Russell I think his name is, and he is the son of Kurt Russell, who in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 plays Star-Lord's dad. So this episode showed why John Walker is not Steve Rogers. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that if Steve Rogers was in a position like this, he would not react this way. he would simply look, okay, by this way, I mean like if his best friend got killed, I don't necessarily think he'd go after the murderer and like shield him to death. And like that last scene where he's standing there, where John Walker is literally standing there, like, and it's like an undershot of him standing there with the shield, and you could see that super soldier's blood on his shield. Phenomenal shot. Loved that shot. And I think that like the question that the show is now trying to raise is, what is the difference between Steve Rogers and John Walker? But here's the thing. They're putting John Walker in situations that Steve Rogers necessarily was never in. But if we equate this to him losing his best friends after Thanos' snap in Infinity War, we could definitely see that he didn't react by going and killing the next thing he saw in his way. But I do also know that in Endgame, like the first few minutes of Endgame are them going to that garden that Thanos is on and trying to kill him. And that right there is just, it's kind of something that I think anyone would do if they witnessed their best friend being killed. So does that necessarily make John Walker a bad guy? I think it's a black and white, it's not a black and white situation. I don't have an opinion on whether or not I think John Walker is a bad guy. I think though, the difference between John Walker and Steve Rogers is that Steve Rogers was not a soldier. Not really anyway. He'd barely gotten into training when he was offered the super soldier serum, and he ended up taking it and becoming Captain America. Whereas John Walker, like as they mentioned, has 3 medals of honor. He is a soldier. He knows how to act as a soldier. That is what he knows. And so I think what's really, really interesting about having the comparison between the two, John Walker and Steve Rogers, is that while they both are similar in many ways, they're both very, very different. Because no longer did Steve Rogers, especially toward the end, see things in black and white. Whereas John Walker still sees things in black and white. For him, when Lamar is killed, he immediately, sorry, spoiler, he immediately thinks black and white. You take from me, I'm going to take from you. And so that's why he goes after Carly's like best friend, lover, I'm not actually sure what he is to her. And that's a really, really interesting way of potentially showing the differences between the two of them. The other thing I want to talk about is the like whole battle between Carly, Zemo, John Walker, and John Walker picking up the super soldier serum. So I did not know what to think, because that whole scene kind of had me going, okay, so obviously Zemo's the villain. No, obviously John Walker's the villain. Because I don't necessarily think the villain is Carly anymore. Okay, so obviously what she's doing is not right. But it's her motives that make it a little more black and white. What I love about Marvel is that they never have something that's so black and white. The villain is not always 100% in the wrong, unless you're like Loki. But like, that's the thing. That's what's interesting, and that's what's very like compelling about Carly's character, is that she's not necessarily doing something bad, but the way she's going about it is bad. Is like, it's this concept of morality, right? Good versus bad. If the motives are good and the methods are bad, where does that leave Carly? And it leaves her in this gray area, where I think John Walker sits in that gray area too. I don't think he's necessarily evil, but I don't think he's necessarily good. And I think that's why he's an okay Captain America. He's not Steve Rogers though. He'll never be Steve Rogers. And I think that's what everyone hates him for. Not necessarily the fact that he is Captain America. It's the fact that he's not Steve Rogers. And him killing everyone and everybody recording it, I think in next week's episode we're gonna see that people are gonna hate him for expressing his anger, and it's something they never saw Steve Rogers do, or not publicly at least. So I think the interesting thing about John Walker picking up the super soldier serum is that he takes it, actually. The fact that he takes it is really interesting, because I thought it was going to be one of those questions of morality where he's like, should I take it, should I not? But it's very clear that he takes it. And there's this beautiful scene where you see Zemo and Sam talking, and Sam goes, I would never take the super soldier serum, because he's seen what it's done to Bucky and to Steve. But when Lamar and John Walker are talking about it, Lamar goes, hell yeah, I would take it. And he goes, imagine how many people we would have saved that day if we'd had this serum. And that is such a testament as to why John Walker takes the serum and then how he reacts when Lamar is killed, because he took the serum. He should have been able to save his best friend. Like, there should be no excuse as to why they can't both live through that whole fight. But that's not what happens. And I think eventually the fight will be between Sam, Bucky, and John Walker. I just don't think the fight's gonna start now. I think right now what they're gonna worry about is Carly and her faction, but I think the public is gonna gradually turn on John Walker, and I think it's gonna be tough. I really liked this week's episode. I think more than last week's episode, there were a lot of compelling scenes. I loved especially the scene where Carly and Sam were talking, and that's where you get the idea that what Carly and the faction are doing is not necessarily completely evil, because Sam straight up says, I agree with what you're saying, I just do not agree with how you are doing it. And I think that's the case with many things. Like Thanos' point in Endgame, in Infinity War, was not that, his point was that there was not enough resources for all the people in the world. And so the way his point is valid, but instead of doubling resources or working to double resources, he chooses to take away half the people. So again, what he's saying is not necessarily bad, but how he goes about it is bad. And I love Marvel for this. I've always loved Marvel for this, because I think that they don't necessarily have to have an all black and white villain. The Avengers are not necessarily always the good guys, i.e. Bucky. But the bad guys, the villains, are not always bad guys. Like, Loki in Avengers was bad, but he was also under the influence of Thanos. And we've seen in other movies that Loki is trying to redeem himself. And he's the god of mischief. Like, you can't really expect that much from the god of mischief. But I really am super impressed with this week's episode. I think that next week's episode is going to be also one to watch. I just think, I think last week's episode must have been a fluke, because, while I see a lot of it was necessary, it just was so not compelling. Whereas this week's episode, you see those compelling conversations between Carly and Sam, John Walker and Lamar, Sarah and Carly. That was a good conversation. That was one where it was Carly knows Sam is just human, but Sam sees that as a threat, which it is. It is a threat. And that's what makes Sam go after Carly. So I genuinely have a lot of high hopes for the show, going forward. I know I was a little hesitant about to say that last week, but I can definitely honestly say that this week's episode was amazing, and I'm really, really happy that I got to watch it. I also do want to say that I think Marvel is a great platform, but I think also there's a lot of inconsistencies. I was watching Endgame a couple days ago, and I was thinking about this, where I was thinking that, everyone says Captain Marvel is so powerful, she can beat Thanos. But there is straight up a fight between Infinity Stone jacked up Thanos and Captain Marvel in Endgame. And she doesn't win. She literally gets her ass handed to her. So I don't know. There's a lot of scenes where I'm like Scarlet Witch, I believe, could have kicked Thanos' ass. 100%. But Captain Marvel, I think that's a failure on the Marvel movies, portrayal of her, because no one likes her. So it's really, it sucks, because in the comics she's great, but it really sucks that in real life nobody really likes her. So yeah. Okay, so that's my update on Falcon and Winter Soldier and just other random Marvel thoughts that I'm having. I don't know if any of this made sense, but this is just me talking about what I love. So yeah, I will see you. Okay, so I thought about something else that I really wanted to add to this. I was thinking about this question about who should be Captain America, because this is obviously very prevalent in the episode and I just didn't really talk about it. But this episode does a really great job of showing that Sam is the one who is meant to be Captain America. Sam is not impulsive. And I never thought that Steve Rogers was impulsive. That was one interesting thing about his character. Him, Iron Man, the way they differ is that I always found Tony super impulsive. And maybe for him that worked, because he had a lot backing him up, right? He had his technology, he had his wealth, he had a great wife, his Pepper, But Steve never really had all that. He had Bucky and he had Sam, and then like that random kiss with Sharon. Like, and Peggy was old, and like, who did Steve really have to back him up? You know, nobody. I mean, sure, like Black Widow and stuff was really nice to have as a friend, but I never really saw that they were a strong support system for Steve. They were his friends, but I don't think he relied on them as much as like Tony relies on Pepper and Peter Parker relies on Tony, and like there's not that chain. Whereas, and I think Sam is actually very similar because he saw that Steve was very reliant, like self-reliant. So I think Sam understands what it means to take on that mantle of Captain America, whereas John Walker just sees it as a way to keep doing what he was doing. But I've said this in another video, I think, like one of my earlier vlogs, when I was talking about the Crown, where I think that like the military in this country is inherently problematic. I think I was talking more about government, but like in what I want to say now is I think the military is inherently problematic, and I think John Walker is a strong example of this, right? Like, he starts off being this really intense soldier, and that's all he knows. And so when he takes on that mantle of being Captain America, that whole point I made earlier about Steve never actually having been a soldier, like a proper like soldier, was actually really cool because he never had that chance to learn that the military is essentially corrupt, right? Like, you teach people to kill. Whereas Steve never really had that, you know? He was pretty lenient. And I was thinking about my point that I'd made with Thanos, that whole like Thanos comment. And I actually, if I remember correctly, which I actually really do need to watch Endgame again because I don't remember it very well, but if I do remember correctly, Steve was one who was just interrogating Thanos. And when Thor like goes to his head, Steve is the one who's like, why did you do that? Because Steve is more like, let me get information and then figure out what to do with you. So I don't know, these are just extra thoughts I had, but I think Sam definitely needs to pick up that mantle of Captain America, and soon, because John Walker's kind of, you know, fucking shit up. So yeah, just an extra thought. Good morning, happy Saturday. I am so excited because Preetha gets here today. It's gonna be so much fun. Okay, that's all. She's here, Nina. Hello. Hi. Hi, this is just me wrapping up this week's video. I had a great week, and I hope you liked coming along.